The auctioneer's gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courthouse steps. Elias Thornfield stood among the small crowd, his calloused hands gripping the deed to Ravens Hollow Manor, a crumbling Victorian mansion that had sat empty for 15 years. 2300 dollars. That's all it took to become the owner of a property that once housed railroad barons and society elites. The same amount most people spent on a vacation had just bought him 12,000 square feet of rotting wood, broken windows, and collapsed dreams. Behind him, Vernon Hayes from a hardware store let out a bitter laugh. The county's going to condemn that death trap within a month. Mark my words. Poor Elias just threw away his daughter's college fund on a pile of termite food. Margaret Wessler, the town librarian, shook her head with theatrical sympathy. That man's grief over losing his wife has clearly affected his judgment. Someone should call social services about that little girl living in whatever fantasy world he's creating. Elias felt their stares burning into his back as he folded the deed carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. His 80-year-old daughter, Iris, squeezed his weathered hand and looked up at him with complete trust in her bright green eyes. "Daddy, when can we see inside our castle?" she whispered, her voice full of wonder rather than doubt. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Vincent Blackwood, the town's most successful property developer, pushed through the small gathering with his perfectly pressed suit and predatory smile. "Elias, my friend, I'll give you 3,000 right now to save yourself the headache. That place needs to be torn down and rebuilt from scratch." Elias met Blackwood's calculating gaze steadily. "Thanks for the offer, Vincent, but we're going to restore her properly. She's got good bones underneath all that neglect." Blackwood's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Good bones don't pay for structural engineers and new foundations. You're a handyman, not a miracle worker. But I admire your optimism, even if it's completely misguided." 3 weeks later, Elias stood before Ravens Hollow Manor with his toolbox and a determination that hadn't wavered despite the town's relentless commentary. The massive structure loomed against the gray morning sky, its broken shutters hanging like wounded wings and ivy crawling up walls that had once been pristine white. Iris skipped ahead, her backpack bouncing as she navigated around fallen boards and scattered debris. She'd insisted on coming along before school, claiming she wanted to help pick which room would be her bedroom once they moved in. The morning peace shattered when Vincent Blackwood's silver Mercedes pulled up to the rusted gate. He emerged wearing another expensive suit, this time accompanied by 2 men in hard hats carrying clipboards. "Elias," Vincent called out, his voice carrying false concern. "I brought some structural engineers to take a look. Professional courtesy, you understand. We want to make sure you and your daughter stay safe while you're playing house in this ruin." The engineers walked the perimeter, shaking their heads and making notes that looked increasingly grim. One of them kicked at a loose foundation stone and watched it crumble. "See that?" Vincent pointed dramatically. "The whole thing is ready to collapse. I'm prepared to offer 4,000 now, but only because I'd hate to see tragedy strike your family." From across the street, a small crowd had gathered. Mrs. Pemberton from the flower shop held her morning coffee and whispered to her neighbor. Dr. Ashford, the town veterinarian, shook his head sadly as he walked his terrier past the scene. "Daddy," Iris tugged at Elias's jacket. "Why is that man trying to scare us away from our castle? Castles are supposed to have dragons guarding them, not mean men in fancy cars." Vincent's face flushed at the child's innocent observation. Elias knelt down and adjusted his daughter's backpack straps. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people can't see the treasure hidden underneath all the dust and cobwebs. But we can, can't we?" Iris nodded solemnly. "We have special eyes for seeing magic, right, Daddy?" "That's right, little bird." Elias stood and faced Vincent directly. "Thanks for the concern, but we'll be just fine. This old lady has stories to tell, and we're going to listen." The front door of Ravens Hollow Manor groaned on rusted hinges as Elias pushed it open for the first time. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through broken windows, and the air held the musty scent of decades-old memories. Iris gasped as they stepped into the grand foyer. Even beneath layers of grime and neglect, The mansion's bones revealed their former glory. A sweeping staircase curved upward like a frozen waterfall, its banister carved with intricate details that spoke of master craftsmanship. "Look, Daddy." Iris pointed to the ceiling where elaborate plasterwork formed roses and vines, though chunks had fallen to create a puzzle on the marble floor below. "It's like a garden that lives on the ceiling." Elias knelt and picked up one of the fallen plaster pieces, turning it over in his experienced hands. The detail work was extraordinary, each petal and leaf carved with precision that modern machinery couldn't replicate. His trained eye caught something else, a signature technique he recognized from his restoration work on historic buildings. As they explored deeper, Elias noticed the door frames weren't standard lumber, but hand-selected hardwoods with joints that had been crafted by true artisans. Behind peeling wallpaper, he glimpsed glimpses of original wood paneling that would be worth a fortune if properly restored. In what had once been a library, Iris discovered built-in bookcases that stretched from floor to ceiling. The wood was darkened with age, but showed no signs of rot or insect damage. When Elias ran his fingers along the shelves, he felt the smooth finish of wood that had been seasoned and treated with methods lost to modern construction. "Daddy, why did someone leave all this beautiful stuff to get broken?" Iris traced patterns in the dust on a windowsill. "Sometimes people forget how to see what's valuable, sweetheart. They only look at what's broken instead of what can be fixed. But we're good at seeing the treasure underneath, aren't we?" The afternoon light shifted through the damaged windows, casting new shadows that revealed hidden details in the architecture. Every room they entered whispered secrets of superior craftsmanship and materials that builders today could barely afford to dream about. Elias felt his excitement building as he recognized the signs of a truly exceptional restoration project hidden beneath years of abandonment. The confrontation came on a Thursday morning when Elias was replacing broken window panes on the mansion's east wing. He'd been working steadily for 2 weeks, and word of his progress had spread through town like wildfire, though not in the way he'd hoped. Vincent Blackwood arrived with an audience this time. Mayor Patricia Hendricks, Town Council member Robert Sterling, and Building Inspector Frank Morrison climbed out of Vincent's Mercedes, their faces set with official disapproval. "Elias Thornfield," Vincent's voice boomed across the overgrown lawn. "This charade has gone on long enough. You're endangering public safety with this foolish restoration project." Mayor Hendricks stepped forward, consulting a clipboard with obvious reluctance. "Elias, we've received numerous complaints about structural hazards. The town council is prepared to issue a condemnation order if you can't provide proper engineering reports within 30 days. From the sidewalk, a small crowd gathered like vultures sensing carrion. Mrs. Pemberton whispered loudly to anyone who would listen. "Poor man's lost his mind since his wife died. Someone should intervene before that little girl gets hurt living in that death trap." Building Inspector Morrison kicked at loose mortar near the foundation. "This whole place should have been torn down years ago. You're throwing good money after bad, and frankly, it's becoming an eyesore that's affecting property values throughout the neighborhood." Iris appeared at her father's elbow, having walked home from school just as the confrontation reached its peak. She clutched her backpack straps and looked up at the circle of disapproving adults with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Why are all these people angry at our castle, Daddy?" she asked in a voice that carried clearly across the yard. Vincent's face reddened at being questioned by a child. "Little girl, this isn't a castle. It's a dangerous building that could collapse and hurt you and your father. Smart people know when to walk away from impossible situations." Elias placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. "The only thing dangerous here is people who've forgotten how to see potential beneath problems. This mansion has better bones than most houses built today." The crowd murmured their disagreement, their judgment hanging heavy in the autumn air. The discovery came by accident on a rain-soaked Saturday morning when Elias was measuring the master bedroom for new floorboards. Iris sat cross-legged in the corner, sketching the elaborate ceiling medallion in her notebook while raindrops drummed against the windows. As Elias pried up a section of warped hardwood near the fireplace, His crowbar struck something hollow beneath. The sound was different from the solid thud of subflooring, more like an echo in an empty chamber. "Daddy, what's that noise?" Iris looked up from her drawing, her pencil poised in midair. Elias knelt and tapped the floorboard systematically, mapping the hollow space below. A section roughly 4 feet square returned the same empty sound. His pulse quickened as he recognized the telltale signs of a hidden compartment, something he'd encountered once before during a restoration of a Civil War-era farmhouse. Working carefully, he found the concealed mechanism, a small brass lever disguised as a decorative floor nail. When he pressed it, a section of flooring lifted on hidden hinges, revealing a secret chamber lined with cedar and filled with carefully preserved items. Inside lay a collection that made Elias's breath catch in his throat. Oil paintings wrapped in oiled cloth depicted scenes of the mansion in its prime, signed by artists whose names he recognized from his art history studies. Handwritten letters tied, with ribbon, bore the letterhead of famous industrialists and politicians from the 1890s. Most stunning of all was a leather portfolio containing architectural drawings of the mansion signed by Stanford White, one of America's most celebrated architects. The plans revealed hidden passages, secret rooms, and construction details that explained the superior craftsmanship Elias had been admiring. "Look at this, sweetheart," Elias whispered, carefully lifting out a silver photograph frame containing a portrait of the mansion's original family. This house belonged to the Ravens Hollow family. They were railroad magnates who commissioned some of the finest craftsmen in America. Iris crawled closer, her eyes wide with wonder. "Are we treasure hunters now, Daddy?" The implications hit Elias like lightning. This wasn't just a neglected old house. This was a historically significant mansion with provenance that could change everything. That evening, Elias spread the discovered documents across his kitchen table, while Iris helped organize them by date. The dining room had become an impromptu research center, with library books about Stanford White, the Gilded Age, and railroad history stacked in careful towers. The architectural drawings revealed extraordinary details. Stanford White had designed not just a mansion, but a masterpiece of American architecture, complete with imported Italian marble, hand-carved German woodwork, and structural innovations that were decades ahead of their time. A letter dated 1894 from Railroad Baron Cornelius Ravenshollow to White discussed the mansion's construction budget, $200,000, equivalent to over $6 million in today's money. The correspondence revealed that Ravenshollow had spared no expense in creating what he called his family's permanent legacy. Iris pointed to a faded photograph showing the mansion during its grand opening celebration. Ladies in elaborate gowns and gentlemen in formal evening were filled the very rooms that now stood empty and damaged. The same ceiling medallion she'd been sketching appeared pristine and gleaming in the old photograph. "Daddy, this picture looks like a fairy tale ball. Were there really princesses living in our castle?" Elias studied a detailed inventory list written in careful Victorian handwriting. The mansion had once housed priceless art collections, imported furniture, and decorative elements worth millions. Much of it had been sold off or moved when the family lost their fortune in the 1929 stock market crash, but the architectural elements remained embedded in the structure itself. The most significant document was a letter from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, dated 1987, expressing interest in purchasing the mansion for restoration as a museum. The deal had apparently fallen through when the last Ravenshollow heir died intestate, leaving the property in legal limbo for decades. As Elias researched comparable Stanford White buildings that had been successfully restored, he realized he was sitting on a conservation goldmine. The Newport mansions that drew thousands of tourists annually were architecturally similar, but less historically complete than Ravenshollow Manor. His hands trembled slightly as he calculated the potential value. If properly restored and designated as a historic landmark, the mansion could be worth tens of millions. Even more importantly, it could serve as a museum showcasing American craftsmanship and Gilded Age luxury that few other properties could match. The Blacktown car pulled up to Ravenshollow Manor on a crisp Tuesday morning, its occupant stepping out with the purposeful grace of someone accustomed to evaluating priceless things. Helena Ashworth, president of the State Historical Preservation Society, had driven 3 hours after receiving Elias's carefully worded phone call about significant architectural discoveries. Elias met her at the gate, his work clothes clean, but clearly marking him as a laborer rather than a scholar. Helena's silver hair was perfectly styled, her wool coat expensive, but her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had spent decades distinguishing genuine treasures from clever fakes. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, extending a gloved hand. "Your message mentioned Stanford White architectural drawings. I must tell you, we receive many such claims that prove to be wishful thinking or reproductions." Elias led her through the mansion's front entrance, watching her expression change as she absorbed the scale and craftsmanship of the foyer. Her practiced eye immediately recognized details that casual observers missed. The hand-carved newel post, the precision of the plasterwork, the quality of materials that spoke of unlimited budgets and master craftsmen. When he showed her the hidden chamber and carefully presented the architectural drawings, Helena's professional composure cracked. She examined the papers with a magnifying glass, checking watermarks, ink composition, and the specific drafting techniques that authenticated White's work. "My God," she whispered, studying a detailed elevation drawing. "This is genuine Stanford White documentation for a previously unknown commission. Do you understand what you found here?" From the doorway, Iris watched the elegant woman handle their treasures with reverent care. Helena noticed the child and smiled warmly. "Young lady, you and your father have discovered one of the most significant architectural finds in decades. This mansion represents craftsmanship and design that simply doesn't exist anymore." Helena's thorough examination continued for hours. She documented each artifact, took extensive photographs, and made detailed notes about the mansion's current condition. Her excitement grew with each room they explored as she recognized the extraordinary preservation of original elements beneath the surface decay. "Mr. Thornfield," she said finally, "this property deserves immediate historic designation and professional restoration. The architectural and historical value here is literally immeasurable." Vincent Blackwood's reaction to Helena Ashworth's arrival was swift and vicious. By Thursday morning, he had assembled what he called a citizens' committee concerned about property values and public safety. The group gathered on the mansion's front lawn like an angry mob, armed with clipboards and righteous indignation. "Those so-called experts can be bought," Vincent declared to the assembled crowd. "I've seen this scam before. Someone plants fake documents, brings in a Confederate to authenticate them, and suddenly worthless property becomes priceless. It's fraud, pure and simple." Mayor Hendricks stood beside him, clearly uncomfortable but politically trapped. "The building inspector has serious concerns about structural integrity. We can't allow sentiment or wishful thinking to override public safety regulations." From the mansion's front steps, Elias watched the spectacle with quiet dignity while Iris pressed close to his side. The child had grown quieter over the past weeks as the town's hostility intensified, but her faith in her father never wavered. Mrs. Pemberton from the flower shop waved a petition with dramatic flourishes. 17 families have signed this demand for immediate condemnation. "We won't allow this neighborhood to become a tourist circus because one man refuses to accept reality." Dr. Ashford, the veterinarian, added his professional voice to the complaints. "The liability issues alone should concern everyone. What happens when curious visitors start getting hurt exploring this death trap?" Vincent's masterstroke was bringing local contractor Jake Morrison, building inspector Frank's brother, to provide what he called an independent structural assessment. Morrison walked the property's perimeter with exaggerated concern, pointing out foundation cracks and loose shutters that he claimed posed imminent danger. "This building is beyond salvage," Morrison announced loudly enough for the growing crowd to hear. "Any competent contractor would recommend immediate demolition. Mr. Thornfield is either incompetent or delusional if he thinks otherwise." Helena Ashworth's sedan pulled up just as Vincent was reaching his rhetorical climax. She emerged with a leather portfolio and the unshakable confidence of someone who had battled preservation fights across multiple states. "Gentlemen," she said coolly, addressing the crowd with the authority of decades in historic preservation. "I believe you're operating under some serious misconceptions about both the structural integrity and historical significance of this remarkable property." The official validation came on a bright Friday morning when 3 black SUVs arrived at Ravens Hollow Manor carrying a team that would change everything. Dr. Marcus Webb, chief architectural historian from the Smithsonian Institution, emerged alongside certified appraisers from Sotheby's Auction House and representatives from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Helena Ashworth had worked through the night, making phone calls that brought the nation's top preservation experts to this small town. As word spread through the community, the same neighbors who had mocked Elias now gathered with cameras and curiosity. Dr. Webb spent 4 hours examining every detail of the hidden documents while his team photographed and cataloged each artifact. The Sotheby's appraiser handled the oil paintings with white gloves, his excitement barely contained as he identified signatures of renowned American artists whose works rarely appeared at auction. "This Stanford white documentation is extraordinary," Dr. Webb announced to the growing crowd. "We're looking at architectural plans for a commission that historians believed was never completed. The historical significance alone makes this property invaluable to American cultural heritage." The Sotheby's representative, Elizabeth Chun, addressed the crowd with professional precision. "Based on our preliminary assessment, the artwork and documents found in the hidden chamber have an estimated value exceeding $2 million. The architectural elements and period fixtures throughout the mansion represent additional millions in historical value." Vincent Blackwood's face had turned ashen as the expert testimonies destroyed his narrative of worthless property and delusional dreams. Mayor Hendricks shifted nervously, realizing the political implications of nearly condemning a nationally significant historic site. But it was the structural engineer's report that delivered the final vindication. Contrary to local claims about imminent collapse, the mansion's foundation and load-bearing elements showed remarkable integrity. The superior materials and construction methods had preserved the building's structural soundness despite decades of surface neglect. Young Iris squeezed her father's hand as the official announcements continued. "Daddy," she whispered, "does this mean everyone will stop being mean about our castle?" Dr. Webb overheard and knelt to address the child directly. "Your father saw something remarkable that everyone else missed. He protected something truly precious for all of America to enjoy. That makes him a hero in my book." The crowd's murmur had shifted from skepticism to amazement as the full scope of the discovery became clear. The media attention arrived like a thunderstorm, transforming the quiet street into a circus of news vans, reporters, and curious onlookers from across the state. Channel 7's Evening News led with the headline, "Local handyman's $2,000 gamble becomes $20 million discovery." Standing in front of the mansion that had been ridiculed just weeks before, reporter Sarah Martinez interviewed Dr. Webb for the live broadcast. "This represents one of the most significant architectural discoveries in decades," he explained to the camera. "Mr. Thornfield's preservation instincts saved a piece of American history that we nearly lost forever." The same townspeople who had whispered about Elias's poor judgment now lined up to offer congratulations and apologies. Mrs. Pemberton brought a fresh bouquet from her flower shop, her earlier petition conveniently forgotten. Dr. Ashford stopped by with homemade cookies and sheepish smiles. But it was Mayor Hendricks who provided the most dramatic reversal. Standing before the assembled crowd and cameras, she announced the town council's unanimous vote to fast-track the mansion's designation as a local historic landmark with full municipal support for restoration efforts. Vincent Blackwood made one final desperate appearance, arriving with his lawyer and a prepared statement claiming the discovery validated his vision for the property's development potential. His words fell flat as reporters peppered him with questions about why he had tried so hard to demolish what experts now called an architectural treasure. Helena Ashworth stepped forward with news that left even Elias speechless. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has approved a restoration grant of $5 million, she announced. Additionally, we've secured commitments from 3 major foundations to fund the mansion's conversion into a public museum showcasing Gilded Age craftsmanship and Stanford White's architectural genius. Iris tugged at her father's sleeve as cameras flashed around them. "Daddy, are we rich now?" she asked with the innocent directness of childhood. Elias knelt beside his daughter, overwhelmed by the transformation of their lives. "We're rich in ways that matter most, sweetheart. We saved something beautiful for everyone to enjoy, and people finally understand what we saw all along." The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause as father and daughter embraced in front of the mansion that had changed from symbol of folly to testament of vision in just a few extraordinary weeks. The final confrontation came during the town's emergency council meeting, called to address what Mayor Hendricks diplomatically termed the Ravens Hollow Manor situation. The courthouse was packed beyond capacity, with standing room only as the entire community gathered to witness the resolution of the drama that had consumed their town. Vincent Blackwood entered with his legal team and a thick folder of documents, his last desperate attempt to maintain control of the narrative. He demanded speaking time as a concerned citizen and major local employer, his voice carrying the forced confidence of a man fighting a losing battle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vincent addressed the crowd, his prepared speech polished but increasingly hollow. "While we all celebrate Mr. Thornfield's fortunate discovery, we cannot ignore the dangerous precedent this sets. Allowing unqualified individuals to undertake major restoration projects without proper permits and oversight threatens our community's safety standards." But Dr. Webb rose from the audience with documents that shattered Vincent's final gambit. "Actually, Mr. Blackwood, our investigation revealed that Mr. Thornfield holds a master's degree in historic preservation from Colonial Williamsburg and spent 15 years as chief restoration specialist for the Virginia Historical Society before moving here after his wife's death." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Elias had never mentioned his professional background, allowing everyone to assume he was just a simple handyman. Helena Ashworth stood to add her testimony, her voice carrying across the stunned silence. "Furthermore," she announced, "we discovered that Mr. Blackwood has been purchasing historic properties throughout the region specifically to demolish them for modern development. His company destroyed 3 19th-century mansions in the past 5 years, erasing irreplaceable architectural heritage for profit." Vincent's face flushed crimson as his true motives were exposed before the entire community. The man who had positioned himself as the voice of reason and progress stood revealed as someone who destroyed history for personal gain. Iris sat in the front row beside her father, finally understanding why some adults had been so angry about their castle. She raised her small hand and was recognized by Mayor Hendricks with an indulgent smile. "My daddy didn't just save our castle," the 80-year-old declared with perfect clarity. "He saved it for everyone, because that's what heroes do." The standing ovation that followed lasted 5 full minutes. 6 months later, Ravens Hollow Manor stood transformed into something that exceeded even Elias's most optimistic dreams. The grand reopening ceremony drew visitors from across the country, with dignitaries, historians, and preservation enthusiasts filling the beautifully restored rooms that now served as a living museum of American craftsmanship. Iris wore her best dress as she led the first official tour, her young voice confidently explaining the hidden chamber discovery to wide-eyed visitors. She had become something of a celebrity, the little girl who helped her father save Castle, and she handled the attention with the same grace that had sustained her family through months of community ridicule. Elias stood in the mansion's grand foyer, watching tourists marvel at the restored plasterwork and gleaming hardwood floors. He had been appointed as the museum's chief curator, a position that perfectly combined his preservation expertise with his intimate knowledge of the building's secrets. Helena Ashworth approached with a distinguished gentleman in an expensive suit. "Elias, I'd like you to meet James Patterson from the Getty Foundation." They're considering funding similar preservation projects based on the Ravens Hollow model. The success had brought unexpected opportunities. 3 other towns had contacted Elias about mysterious properties that local experts had dismissed as worthless. His reputation as someone who could see potential where others saw only problems had spread throughout the preservation community. Vincent Blackwood had quietly left town after his development company faced multiple investigations into questionable demolitions. His former properties were being reviewed for historical significance, with several already receiving protective designations. As evening approached and the last tourists departed, Elias and Iris walked through the mansion's garden, now restored to its original Victorian splendor. Father and daughter paused beside the fountain that once again sparkled with clear water. "Daddy," Iris said thoughtfully, "do you think there are other castles waiting for people to save them?" Elias smiled at his daughter's question, remembering the skeptical faces and dismissive voices that had nearly prevented this miracle. "I think there are treasures everywhere, sweetheart, hidden in plain sight, waiting for people who know how to look past what's broken to see what's beautiful." If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, or if you've ever discovered hidden value in something others overlooked.